Part 1. The Cosmic Science Commission had existed for longer than most stars. Its purpose was simple: to study every intelligent species in the universe and understand how their minds worked. The Commission had files on 10,000 different species from 12 different galaxies. They knew how the thought. They understood why they stopped exploring after a certain age. They had charts and graphs and mathematical models that could predict the behavior of almost any thinking creature in existence. And then they started studying humans. Commissioner was the one who first noticed the problem. She was an ancient being, her body made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light when she was thinking hard. She had reviewed the data on humans 17 times now, and each time she came to the same impossible conclusion. The numbers were wrong. They had to be wrong. She called an emergency meeting of the senior researchers. They gathered in the observation chamber, a vast room with walls that showed the slowly spinning arms of distant galaxies, projected the human data onto the central display, and waited for someone else to see what she had seen. "This cannot be accurate," said Research Director, a tall being with 7 eyes arranged in a circle around his head. "Your instruments must be malfunctioning." "I have checked the instruments 14 times," replied. "They are functioning perfectly." Then the data collectors made errors in the field. "I have reviewed their methodology. It is flawless." Studied the display with all 7 of his eyes. The data showed something that should not be possible. Every species the Commission had ever studied followed the same basic pattern of mental development. Young members of a species were curious and eager to learn. They asked questions constantly. They wanted to explore everything. But as they grew older, this curiosity faded. By the time they reached middle age, most intelligent beings had learned what they needed to know and stopped seeking new information. By old age, they had settled into comfortable routines and rarely thought about anything new at all. This was universal. It was as reliable as gravity. The Commission had built their entire understanding of intelligence around this simple truth. Curiosity was a young creature's trait, and it always faded with time. But the human data showed something completely different. "According to these readings," said slowly, "human curiosity does not decrease with age." "Correct," said. "In fact, in some cases it appears to increase." "Also correct." "That is impossible." "And yet the data is clear." The room fell silent. The researchers stared at the display, trying to find some explanation that made sense. But there was none. The humans were breaking a rule that no species had ever broken before. Made her recommendation. The Commission would send a research vessel to Earth's solar system. They would observe humans directly. They would find out what was really going on. The vessel arrived 3 cycles later, hiding behind Earth's moon where it could not be detected. The research team aboard was the best the Commission had. They had studied hundreds of species. They were prepared for anything. Or so they thought. The first human they observed was a female named Dr. Vance. She was 83 years old, which meant she had lived for most of her species natural. By all known models, she should have been in the final stage of cognitive decline. She should have been resting, conserving energy, thinking only about comfortable and familiar things. Instead, she was crawling through a cave. The research team watched in confusion as this elderly human squeezed through narrow passages of rock, a small light attached to her head, a bag of tools hanging from her belt. She moved slowly because her body was old, but she did not stop. She kept going deeper into the cave, farther from the surface, into places where no light had ever reached. "What is she doing?" asked one of the junior researchers. "Unknown," said the team leader. "Continue observation." They watched as Dr. Vance reached a small chamber deep underground. She pulled out her tools and began taking samples of the rock. She examined the walls with a small magnifying device. And then she made a sound that the translation software struggled to interpret. "Analysis of vocalization," the team leader requested. "The sound appears to be laughter," the software reported. It indicates happiness, amusement, or joy. Why would she be experiencing joy? She is alone in a dark cave. Unknown, additional context required. They listened as Dr. Vance spoke to herself, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "Oh, would you look at that," she said. "I have never seen a formation like this, not in 60 years of field work. What are you, little one? What secrets are you hiding?" She was talking to a rock. An old human at the end of her life was crawling through caves and talking to rocks as if they were friends she was meeting for the first time. The team leader made a note. Humans may experience cognitive malfunction in old age, possible explanation for anomalous data. But as they continued to observe, they realized that Dr. Vance was not malfunctioning. Her mind was sharp. Her observations were precise. She took careful notes and made accurate measurements. She was doing real scientific work, the kind that required a functioning and focused mind. She was simply happy to be doing it. Over the following days, the team expanded their observations. They found more humans like Dr. Vance. There was Doctor, a 78-year-old who studied ocean creatures. They watched him put on a special suit and dive into deep water, moving through the darkness with a light in his hand, searching for animals that lived far below the surface. When he found a creature with 8 arms and intelligent eyes, he stopped and watched it for a long time, and his vital signs showed the same response they would expect from a young human seeing something for the first time. There was Doctor, who was 91 years old and had spent her entire adult life studying one type of small insect, 60 years of research on a single creature. The team assumed she must know everything there was to know about it by now. But when they listened to her speak, she said something that confused them greatly. "I have barely begun to understand them," she said. "Every answer reveals 10 new questions. I could study them for another 100 years and still not know everything." She did not sound frustrated by this. She sounded delighted. The team leader sent an urgent message back to Commissioner. "The data is accurate. Humans do not lose curiosity with age. Request permission to extend study indefinitely." Read the message 3 times. Then she did something she had not done in 10,000 years. She laughed. "Permission granted," she replied. "Find out how they do it." The research team settled in for a long investigation. They had studied species that could live for millions of years. They had studied species that could travel between dimensions. They had studied species with minds so vast they could think 1,000 thoughts at once. But they had never studied anything like humans. There was something different about these small, short-lived creatures, something that everything the Commission thought they knew about intelligence and age and the nature of the thinking mind. The humans were impossible. They were wonderful, and the Commission was determined to understand them. Dr. Vance climbed out of her cave as the sun was setting. She was tired and dirty and her knees hurt. She was also smiling. In her bag were samples of a mineral formation she had never seen before. Tomorrow she would analyze them. She would learn something new. And then she would find another cave, another question, another mystery to chase. She was 83 years old, and she could not wait to see what she would discover next. Part 2. The research team spent the next several cycles gathering data on human researchers. They observed scientists in laboratories and professors in universities. They watched field workers in jungles and deserts and frozen wastelands. They recorded thousands of hours of human behavior, and every hour brought new confusion. The team leader, a being called who could change shape to blend into any environment, took personal charge of the observation of Doctor. She was 91 years old and had spent her entire life studying stars. Her body was frail and she walked slowly with a metal support device. Her eyes were weak and she needed special lenses to see clearly. By all physical measures, she was near the end of her existence. But her mind burned like the stars she studied. Watched as Doctor sat in a large building filled with equipment for looking at distant space. Young humans moved around her, operating the machines and gathering data. They treated her with great respect, calling her professor and asking for her advice. She answered their questions with patience and precision, her voice soft but clear. Then the machines found something. The young humans gathered around a display showing new information from a distant part of space. They spoke in excited voices, pointing at patterns and numbers that meant nothing to. But Doctor sat very still, staring at the display with an expression that the translation software could not fully interpret. Then she began to cry. Immediately checked her vital signs, expecting to find evidence of pain or distress, but the readings showed something else entirely. Doctor's brain was flooding with chemicals associated with pleasure and happiness. Her heart rate had increased. Her breathing had deepened. She was experiencing intense positive emotion. "What is happening?" asked the observation team. "Analysis suggests she is experiencing a state called awe," came the reply. "It occurs when humans encounter something vast or powerful that challenges their understanding of the universe. She has studied stars for 70 years. How can she still experience awe at seeing them?" "Unknown. This requires further investigation." Listened as one of the young humans put a hand on Doctor's shoulder. "Professor, are you all right?" he asked. Doctor wiped her eyes and smiled. "I am more than all right," she said. "Look at it. Look at what we found. A stellar nursery hiding behind that dust cloud all this time. New stars being born right now as we watch. I have waited my whole life to see something like this." "You have seen many stellar nurseries before," the young human said. "Yes, and each one is a miracle. Each one reminds me how much we still do not know, how much there is still to discover." She laughed, a sound full of joy. "I am 91 years old and the universe can still surprise me. Is that not wonderful?" Recorded everything and added it to the growing file of impossible human behavior. At the same time, another member of the research team was observing Doctor. He was 78 years old and studied creatures that lived in Earth's oceans. The team member, a being called who existed as a cloud of interconnected particles, followed Doctor on one of his underwater expeditions. The old human moved slowly through the water, his body enclosed in a protective suit that let him breathe. He carried a light and a small device for recording images. He had done this same thing thousands of times before. By all logic, it should have become routine for him, boring even. Had observed other species who performed repetitive tasks, and they always developed a condition the commission called experience fatigue. The more you did something, the less interesting it became. But Doctor showed no signs of experience fatigue. When he found a creature with 8 arms hiding in a crack in the rock, he stopped and watched it with the same intensity a young human would show. His heart rate increased. His brain activity spiked. He stayed very still, barely breathing, as if he was afraid any movement would break the spell. The 8-armed creature watched him back with large, intelligent eyes. For several minutes, neither of them moved. Then Doctor did something strange. He raised one of his hands and waved at the creature. Slowly, carefully, one of the creature's 8 arms rose and made a similar motion. Doctor's vital signs went through the roof. Joy flooded his system. He made a sound that was half laugh and half sob, muffled by his breathing equipment. Later, back on the surface, listened as Doctor spoke to his young assistants. "That octopus waved at me," he said, still sounding amazed. "I have been diving for 50 years and I have never had one wave back at me before." "Maybe it was just moving its arm," one of the assistants suggested. "Maybe," Doctor agreed. "Or maybe it was trying to communicate. Maybe it was curious about me just like I was curious about it. We will never know for certain, and that is what makes it wonderful." "I don't understand," the assistant said. "How can not knowing something be wonderful?" Doctor smiled at the young human with what seemed like great affection. "Because it means there is still more to learn. If we knew everything, what would be the point of getting out of bed in the morning?" Added this to the observation file. Humans appear to find pleasure in uncertainty. This contradicts all known models of intelligent behavior. The research team gathered to share their findings. Each of them had observed something that should not be possible. Elderly humans who wept with joy at new discoveries. Old scientists who talked about their life's work as if they had just begun. Researchers who had spent decades studying a single subject and still insisted they knew almost nothing. Perhaps it is because they live such short lives, suggested one team member. They know they will die soon, so they try to experience as much as possible before the end. That theory does not hold, replied. They live even shorter lives than humans, and they become extremely conservative with age. They avoid new experiences because they fear wasting their remaining time on things that might not matter. Then perhaps humans are simply incapable of learning, another team member suggested. They keep seeking new knowledge because they cannot retain what they have already discovered. Also incorrect. Our observations show that elderly humans often have vast stores of knowledge. Doctor can recall details of stellar formations she studied 60 years ago. Doctor remembers the behavior of ocean creatures he observed as a young man. Their memories are excellent. Then what is the explanation? The room fell silent. Nobody had an answer. Then the junior researcher, a small being called Pip who had been quietly reviewing recordings in the corner, spoke up. I may have found something. The team turned to look at Pip. Junior researchers were not usually the ones who made important discoveries, but Pip projected a recording onto the central display, and suddenly everyone was paying very close attention. The recording showed two elderly humans sitting in a room filled with food and drink. They were both very old, their hair white and their faces lined with age. According to the data files, they were both senior researchers at a human university, experts in the study of tiny living things that humans called enzymes. They were arguing. You are completely wrong about the origin of this enzyme, one of them said. I have shown you the data. The evidence is clear. Your interpretation of the data is flawed, the other replied. You are ignoring the secondary pathway entirely. The secondary pathway is irrelevant. I proved that 20 years ago. You proved nothing. You made assumptions and everyone was too polite to challenge you. The argument went on for several more minutes, growing more and more heated. The two old humans raised their voices and waved their hands in the air. They interrupted each other and made faces of frustration. And then suddenly, one of them laughed. I have been wrong about this 3 times already, he said. What is one more revision? The other human laughed too. Remember when we were certain it was a bacterial origin? We published that paper and had to retract it 6 months later. Our colleagues never let us forget it. Being wrong is part of the process. How else do we learn? I suppose you have a point. Very well, show me your data again. Maybe I missed something. Just like that, the argument was over. The two old humans leaned toward each other, looking at a display together, their voices now calm and curious. Pip paused the recording. Did you see it? He asked. The team was silent for a moment, then spoke slowly. They were not upset about being wrong. Correct, said Pip. In fact, they seemed to expect it. Being wrong was not a failure for them. It was an invitation, finished. Being wrong was an invitation to learn more. The team looked at each other. For the first time since they had arrived at Earth, they felt like they might be getting close to understanding something important about humans. Pip sent an urgent message to Commissioner. We may have found a key insight. Humans do not experience being wrong as failure. They experience it as opportunity. Request guidance on how to proceed. The response came quickly. Continue observation. We need to understand this fully. The team returned to their work with new energy. They were still confused, still surrounded by impossible data and unexplainable behavior. But now they had a thread to follow. Somewhere in the human mind, there was a mechanism that turned the pain of uncertainty into the pleasure of discovery. They just had to find it. Part 3. The research team spent many more cycles observing humans before they were ready to present their conclusions. They gathered data from every continent on Earth. They studied humans of all ages, from young children just learning to ask questions to elderly researchers still seeking answers after decades of work. They analyzed brain scans and chemical responses and behavioral patterns until they were certain they understood what they were seeing. Then they sent their final report to the Cosmic Science Commission. The report was 12,000 pages long. It contained data from 300 different observation sites. It included analysis of over 10,000 individual humans. But when Commissioner read it, she found that the core finding could be expressed in just a few words. Humans had learned to find pleasure in not knowing. She called a full meeting of the Commission. Representatives from 1,000 different species gathered in the Great Hall, a vast space at the center of the Commission's headquarters. Light from distant stars filtered through the transparent walls, casting long shadows across the assembled delegates. Some of them had been studying intelligence for millions of years. Some of them had minds so powerful they could simulate entire civilizations in their thoughts. All of them fell silent when took her place at the central platform. "My fellow commissioners," she began, "we have studied 10,000 species across 12 galaxies. We have built our understanding of intelligence on certain fundamental truths that we believe to be universal. Today, I must tell you that one of those truths is incomplete." She projected the human data onto the display. Charts and graphs filled the air, showing the impossible patterns that had first caught her attention so many cycles ago. "We have always understood curiosity as a survival mechanism," she continued. "Young creatures need to learn about their environment quickly in order to survive. So evolution gave them curiosity, a powerful drive to explore and discover. But this drive comes with a cost. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. Not knowing things is stressful. So as creatures grow older and learn what they need to survive, the drive fades. The discomfort of uncertainty is replaced by the comfort of knowledge. This is the pattern we have observed in every species we have studied." She paused and let the data speak for itself. "Until now." The delegates murmured among themselves. They had all reviewed the preliminary reports, but seeing the full data was still shocking. "Humans have evolved differently," said. "Their curiosity does not fade with age. In many cases, it grows stronger. Our researchers have spent considerable time trying to understand why." She changed the display to show recordings of the humans they had observed. Dr. Vance, crawling through caves at 83. Doctor, weeping with joy at the sight of new stars at 91. Doctor, still diving into dark waters at 78. Doctor, still studying her beloved insects after 60 years and insisting she had barely begun to understand them. "The answer lies in how humans experience uncertainty," explained. "For most species, not knowing something is a negative state. It causes discomfort and anxiety. The natural response is to seek an answer as quickly as possible and then stop seeking once the answer is found. This is efficient. It conserves energy and reduces stress. But humans have developed a different response. For them, not knowing something is not just a problem to be solved. It is also an opportunity to be explored. They have learned to find pleasure in the gap between question and answer. They have learned to enjoy the process of discovery, not just the result." A delegate from the sector raised a limb to speak. "This seems inefficient and irrational. Why would any species evolve to enjoy discomfort?" "Because it is not discomfort for them," replied. "That is the key insight. Humans have somehow transformed uncertainty from a negative experience into a positive one. They call this state wonder." She showed the recording of the two elderly scientists arguing about enzymes. The delegates watched as the humans moved from heated disagreement to shared laughter to collaborative exploration, all in the space of a few minutes. Notice their response to being wrong said, "For most species, being wrong is a failure. It means time and energy have been wasted. But for humans, being wrong is an invitation to learn more. Each mistake opens a new path of inquiry. Each wrong answer suggests new questions to ask." This is why their curiosity does not fade, she continued. For most species, knowledge is a destination. Once you arrive, the journey is over. But for humans, knowledge is a door. Each answer they find opens into a room full of new questions. They do not lose wonder with age because there is always more to wonder about. The more they learn, the more they realize they do not know. And they have learned to find joy in that endless unfolding. The great hall was silent. The delegates were processing what they had heard, trying to fit this new information into their existing models of intelligence. Finally, research director spoke. If this is true, then humans represent something unique in the history of intelligent life. A species that has overcome the natural limits of curiosity. A species that can maintain the excitement of discovery throughout their entire. That is our conclusion, agreed. What are the implications for the Commission's work? Had thought carefully about this question. I recommend that we classify humans as a protected research subject. They are too valuable to risk and too strange to ignore. We must continue to study them, but we must also ensure that our study does not interfere with their natural development. Whatever mechanism allows them to maintain wonder, it is fragile. It could be damaged by outside influence. The vote was unanimous. Humans would be protected and observed, but never contacted or disturbed. The Commission would watch from a distance as this remarkable species continued to ask questions and seek answers, and find joy in the endless pursuit of understanding. After the meeting, returned to her private chamber and reviewed the observation data one more time. She found herself returning again and again to the recordings of Dr. Vance, the old woman who crawled through caves and talked to rocks. In one recording, Dr. Vance was speaking to a group of young humans at a university. She stood at the front of a room filled with students, her white hair bright under the lights, her old hands steady on the edge of a table. "People ask me why I still do field work at my age," she said. "They think I should be retired by now, sitting in a comfortable chair, writing about the things I discovered when I was young. But I cannot do that. Do you know why?" The young humans shook their heads. "Because I am not finished yet. I am not even close to finished. Every time I think I understand something, I find out I was wrong. Every time I answer a question, 10 more appear. The world is so much bigger and stranger and more wonderful than I ever imagined when I was your age. And the more I learn, the bigger it gets." She smiled at them, and could see in her face the same expression she had seen in young humans just beginning their journey of discovery. "That is the secret," Dr. Vance said. "Never stop being amazed. Never stop being wrong. Never stop asking questions. The universe will always have more to show you than you have time to see. And that is not a sad thing. That is a beautiful thing. That is what makes life worth living." Saved the recording and closed the display. She sat in silence for a long time, her crystalline form pulsing with colors she had not felt in. Wonder, the humans called it. She thought about her own long existence. The millions of years she had spent cataloging data and organizing knowledge and building models that explained the universe. She had learned so much. She knew so many things. But somewhere along the way she had stopped asking questions. She had stopped being surprised. She had achieved exactly what the Commission expected of an intelligence of her age: comfortable certainty, efficient knowing, the calm of answers without the turbulence of questions. And she realized, for the first time, what she had lost. Far away on Earth, Dr. Vance was celebrating her 84th birthday. Her children and gathered around her, presenting her with gifts and cake. But the gift she was most excited about was the one she had given herself: enrollment in an online course about deep-sea hydrothermal vents. "Oceanography?" her daughter asked, confused. You have never studied the ocean before. You are a geologist. Dr. Vance smiled. Exactly. I know almost nothing about hydrothermal vents. Is that not exciting? Her daughter did not look like she found it exciting. She looked worried. Mother, you are 84 years old. Do you really need to start learning something completely new at your age? Need, Dr. Vance laughed. No, I do not need to. I want to. There is so much I do not know, so many questions I have never asked. I cannot wait to find out what I have been missing. She looked out the window at the night sky, where stars she had never studied burned with light she had never analyzed. The universe is so big, she said softly, and I am so small, and there is so much still to discover. She was 84 years old. She had spent her whole life learning, and she was just getting started.